While we're waiting for that, I'm curious, how many people in this room do any like UI design, interfaces, things like that? Cool. How many people swear by the 960 grid? Good, that's a good practice. Sort of, but not really.
720.
720 is okay too. We could turn on the projector. Is that also good?
It says laptop on the side.
Traditionally, long before we had pixels and such, most grids, when they were used, probably starting around the 1940s for most design, were based actually on typographic measurements. And I think it's a real shame that it can make for some really strong grid compositions when you're designing an interface, when you base it off of type. And that's something that I don't know anybody who does that anymore, especially not in web. I think we might have to kill the lights.
Yep. Nope.
Wait a minute. Yeah, all right, there we go. So, today I'm going to go really fast just through 5 parts of good typographic practices, which may help you or it may just make you more of a hipster type geek. We'll see. So, first thing, what is typography? When I say typography, I don't mean what kind of font am I going to use, and I'm actually about to get into that in a second. Typography is really about managing negative space. This is all the space that's between the letters. It's the whites, not the blacks, that defines what you can read. That's what controls all of legibility, is the spacing between letters, spacing between lines, and spacing between paragraphs. So, like I said before we started, a lot of what I'm doing right now is the traditional way of laying stuff out as it was done on paper. But of course, you can do all of this on screen too, and in the future, I want to actually talk about how this translates into CSS and that kind of thing. So, the first thing, some terms, you gotta know them. Typefaces and fonts. Typefaces are like albums, and fonts are like songs. So when you have a typeface like Helvetica, it's made up of a whole bunch of different fonts. For example, Helvetica Extra Light, Helvetica Extra Light Italic, Helvetica Extra Light Expanded, Helvetica Extra Light Condensed, etc., all the way through. So when you're picking out a font, you're picking out a very specific thing. When you say, I love Helvetica, it's my favorite font, you actually mean it's my favorite typeface. Some measurements that we use. 1 inch is 72 points. Points, everybody uses them in Microsoft Word or whatever. I don't think most people know what they actually are. Conveniently, on most displays, 1 point is equal to 1 pixel because you have 72 dots per inch. A pica is another measurement that's often used, although we're not going to get too much into it. It's a 1/6 of an inch, 12 points. And 1 EM, which I'm sure everybody who's ever touched CSS has heard of before, is a measurement that changes depending on what size of type you're using. So if you're using 12-point type, 1 EM is 12 points. Next thing, layout. A measure. This is probably the most important part of determining how you're going to lay out your type. This is column width, page width, whatever you want to use to lay out your type. So the first thing you're going to do when you're deciding how big this should be is not an arbitrary number like 960 divided by 12 or something like that. What you want to do for maximum legibility is do a line that's about 2 to 3 alphabets, so that's 52 to 78 characters, including spaces. Tends to be the most legible line length that you can have. This is also going to determine what size type you should be using. Depending on your column width, you use bigger or smaller type. It's also going to affect the leading, how much you space them out. This is different than kerning. Kerning is what you do between the individual letters to make them look prettier. Leading is the actual spacing out overall, so it's consistent across the entire thing as compared to being different between different letters. It's also going to have a big impact on your line height. This is why professors want essays double spaced, and it's not because they write between the lines. They can, but it's really hard to read 7.5 inches of 12-point type. The lines are way too long. If you're going to do that, you should have 2 columns, shorter columns, smaller line heights. You space them out more and more depending on how wide your column is. I tend to start off by using something like, if I'm doing 10-point type, 11 point or 12 point line heights, 12 point, 14 point line, 14, 16 point lines like that to space it out. And the original measurement comes from the previous slide. Rhythm, don't break it up. If you're going to use different type sizes, make sure that everything still fits on similar line lengths. It's 100 times easier to read when everything, even when it's coming later after some larger type, still fits in consistent increments. Your eye then is really quick to jump from line to line without getting lost at like a new section. Number 3, scale. Scale has been something that's been tweaked with for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there's a reason when you look in Photoshop or Word that there's a couple of default sizes. You never see 51 point listed under those drop-downs unless you type it in. These are the sizes that have been established for a really long time as the ones that are most ideal to use. They're the ones that typefaces, when they're designed by a typographer, are the ones that's going to display at best. This is especially true on screens where you have pixels to consider. If you do something like make it 11.5 point, it's going to look really ugly because it's 11.5 pixels tall. And so it's good to, everybody's fairly familiar with these even subconsciously from using word processing. These are the sizes that you should try to stick to. It'll make it much more legible. Emphasis. This is something that is a little bit a matter of artistic style, but generally using only one form of emphasis is considered good practice. Make it bold, make it italic, don't make it bold, italic, and all caps or something like that. It just gets messy. Relationship. When you have different type sizes, as you probably will for making headings and subsections and stuff like that, use a relationship that fits with the rest of the type size. It makes the typographic composition feel much stronger and more purposeful, rational, thought out. When you use something that's like, my favorite's the middle one, where you have like headings that are twice as tall as your body text. Number 4, details. These ones are especially old-fashioned, but they're kind of interesting to know, and they can actually make your typography look nicer. Number 1, hanging punctuation. When you do bullet points, quotes, you're not supposed to indent them like Microsoft Word does. Just because they do it doesn't mean it's the right practice. Typically, you're supposed to put them outside. That's what margins are for. It's not just so your teachers have somewhere to write comments. Margins are for hanging punctuation, and that includes M dashes, N dashes, which, by the way, if anyone doesn't know, an M dash is the width of an M of whatever type size it is, and an N dash is the width of an N. That's where that comes from. And quotes, bullet points, anything like that, numbered lists are all supposed to hang off the edge versus making it inset, which makes it considerably more difficult for the eye to jump from line to line. Ligatures. These ones you don't see on the computer at all, but they're pretty important if you're ever doing print work, which you may very well be if you ever, are doing a startup project and you want to make some letterhead or something for your logo especially. Ligatures are what prevent text from getting blobby when it's printed, because if you've ever used an inkjet printer versus a laser printer, oftentimes stuff bleeds in paper and you get some really ugly spacing issues and stuff. Ligatures come in most professional typefaces when you buy them online. They let you have like something like F and I. They combine into a single character, which actually makes it considerably more legible because you have less little fiddly bits going on. And number 5, everyone's favorite, picking fonts. This is my favorite set of fonts that I like to use, so some of them are bold, some of them are regular. It depends on the typeface. The list is sort of taken from Massimo Vignelli, who is one of the most famous, highly regarded graphic designers of the 20th century. I took his list of about 10, took some out, added some of my own in, and this is the list of ones that myself and a big part of the design community feel are good, legible typefaces that have been around for a long time and should be used. Actually, this is a quote from him that I forgot to put in here. He feels rather strongly that using different typefaces willy-nilly is a disaster culturally and just horrible. Don't do it. So be thoughtful about which ones you use. Number one, everybody's favorite, Helvetica. It's great, very legible. There's a reason that it's been used so much for almost 70 years now. Futura, really old, 1920s, getting more popular now. I'm not sure why. It's a beautiful one though. I guess that could be it. Universe. If you don't like Helvetica, use Universe. Universe was born from engineering more than art. It was more of an attempt to make something that was like as standardized and easy to use, like out of the box as possible. Helvetica has a lot of issues. You have to kern it just so to make it look right. Otherwise, it looks really tacky, which anybody who's been on Tumblr has seen. Universe is one that you can basically put it down on anything and it looks nicely spaced, very legible. Proxima Nova is a new one. It's one of my favorites for UI design. It has all the best features of Helvetica and Futura mixed together. If you're not familiar with it, definitely check it out. Optima, not super old. It's one of the more modern cuts, pretty elegant. In bolder weights, makes really nice logo type. Castellon has been around forever. Benjamin Franklin said if you want it to be legible, use Castellon. If you don't know, he's had a printing press and printed newspapers. That one's been around forever. I like to use it on my essays. When you see a lot of it on a page, your eyes flow through it. It's really nice. Garamond's good too, not quite as legible, a little bit more stylish. You're making something that you want to look kind of chic, use all capital Garamond, very pretty. Times Roman, everybody knows this one. Baskerville also sort of falls in the same category as Garamond. If you want to do something, make it look stylish, use Baskerville. And Bodoni, also the same category. I'm not so big on using serif typefaces, but these are, the ones that really make stuff look nice. And that's it. I don't know how I did on time. I think that was
time for questions.
10 minutes. If anybody has any questions about UI design, let's hear them.
So what did you use to make this presentation?
Illustrator. I fought with Keynote for hours and then got angry because I couldn't align things just the way I wanted, so I used Illustrator. Oh, all right. Here it comes. More questions in the back.
Why don't you like serif fonts?
Okay, so actually one thing that I didn't mention after this whole thing about legibility is serif fonts were designed for reading on paper. This is what the presentation looks like in Illustrator form. Serif fonts were designed to be read on paper. There's been a lot of research that shows that serifs are much easier to read on paper and sans serifs are much easier to read on screen. In some ways, also because I prefer reading stuff on screen than on paper. I find it easier on my eyes. I think I'm one of the only people in the world who feels that, but I do. I prefer sans serif, and they also look a little bit cleaner to me without the little feet, without the serifs.
Do most browsers support the fonts you mentioned?
Yes, a lot of them are pretty standard. Most people have stuff. Optima is pretty standard. It's on Windows and Mac. Bodoni, not so much, although you can always embed fonts too. Proxima Nova is one that is not standard on various operating systems. That one you have to embed, but in my opinion, it's well worth it. Also in the back, I'll look around.
What are the licenses surrounding those typefaces in general?
So typically it depends a lot on where they're coming from. For example, you have something like Helvetica, which has been licensed, Apple licensed it a long time ago and has used it for a long time. Other companies like Microsoft didn't want to pay to license it, so instead they invented Arial, whom I'm sure everyone has heard of. It looks almost exactly like Helvetica, but slightly uglier with slanted terminals instead of flat. And so in that way it's kind of like a knockoff typeface. Now with most typefaces, some of them are extremely expensive, some of them are not. It depends how many fonts from a typeface you get. If you want to get like the full set of every weight of a particular, every variant of a typeface, sometimes you can pay $300 for a license to use those. Other ones, like the one that Michigan Hackers uses, it's called Ultramagnetic, that one's 20 bucks. So it totally depends on the typeface.
When you type up an essay when you type in Word or Illustrator or LaTeX or whatever?
I've learned to detach myself a little bit from that and not care too much. I like to use Paschal, like I said, it's extremely legible. Times is good too, but typically just using Paschal in Word is working pretty well, since there's not a whole lot of format or layout that goes into that.
So you mentioned putting like quotations in the margins. Is there anything that you implement that in terms of like, or do you have to just like manually put it in the margin? Like in terms of like CSS or like a word processor?
Well, when it comes to word processing, it depends on what you use. Microsoft Word doesn't, because it doesn't care that much, so no. Although you can, in the same way that like you make on a bibliography one line hang out, you can say, oh, make this paragraph, this like block quote hang out, because typically you'd use it for like a block, not an in-text quote, but if you have a block quote. If you have a block quote, then you just say make it hang out 12 points on the first line. Programs though like InDesign that are actually made for publishing on a professional level, they all support that kind of thing.
Okay.
Where do you go to browse for fonts online? Like the fonts or something like that?
Yeah, well, so like I said, I'm not a big fan of like the huge variety that's out there. I think there's a few that have been used for a long time and they work really well. Probably 80% of those come with either your operating system or Adobe Creative Suite when you install it. The other ones, probably one of my favorite sites that actually does have a lot of really high quality ones. You have to buy them, but you work for them. They have, this is also where we got the Michigan Hackers font. They have a pretty good selection as well. That's my favorite place to get them.
I think one more.
One more? Go for it.
So can I do hanging with latex?
With what?
Latex?
I am not familiar with that. Is it? Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry.
So in actual publications, do most of them do hanging these days, or no?
Yeah, typically. If you're like again, it's not like for an in-text quote, but if it's like a set-apart block quote and something, so it depends too on the publication. Something like New Yorker magazine tends to have a lot of thought put into their typographic design. They do that kind of stuff, but you maybe won't see it, you know, like in the Ann Arbor newspaper or something like that.
Yeah.
That it? Sorry. Anybody who has more questions, feel free to talk to me later. I'll be around for sure.